Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today we are with Commissioner Wilson doing virtual office hours from Zoom. Hi, Commissioner.
Hi, how are you? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. How was your week so far?
Oh, it has been a whirlwind, as you know, because you were along for the ride. It's been amazing, but very busy. And we're in different places today since my wash machine went haywire and I was hoping to get it fixed. But yes, it's our tour of all of the Orange County departments. We're getting there. The things that are most important to all of the people that all the residents that we get to talk to, we're understanding more and more about the ways to help them and the ins and outs of all those departments. So it was exciting.
Very, very exciting. I'm so happy that you're here joining us. For those of you who are just tuning in on Facebook, please feel free to drop your questions and comments in the comment box below. Or if you have something that you want us to answer next time, you can always email district1 at ocfl.net. And let's just jump right in because I know this week, we had a lot of emails about the vaccination and the portal and text messages and how that whole process works. So maybe you want to give a little update on COVID.
Okay, so I'm going to continue to encourage everybody to go to the Orange County, Florida webpage. It's the ocfl.net webpage, and register with on that page. There's like a little button on there that allows you to register whether the portal is open or closed, so that your information is in the system and can then be ready to go when the portal does open, even if you are not in the category of people that is right now eligible for the vaccinations. We're anticipating more inventory. We don't always know really far in advance how that's going to come down the pipeline, and we really are reliant with our communications with the state and the federal government. So what we can do on this side is to try to get as many people information from the county as possible. There's been some information out from sources, media sources, that the state also has a registration. We are not currently using that for appointments. So please utilize, while we are still utilizing the county logistics in the county appointment system, utilize that website, get in, get registered. And there's also even a tab for getting text reminders. I put them into my system now so that I know if there's anything new going on. We still have testing at Barnett Park 7 days a week. So testing is another tool that we can use to try to keep the spread from getting any worse. And I think that we really rounded a corner this week in that we now have more people vaccinated than we have active cases, which I think was something that people were anticipating wouldn't happen for a while. So I felt like that was very positive news. Cannot let off on what you're doing to stay safe and what you're doing to keep your neighbor and friends safe, your neighbors and friends safe. Keep distancing, keep your mask on in public, and stay up to date on all that information so that you can help us help all the residents with updates.
That's awesome. And, if you have any questions, I know a lot of people have been asking about specific scenarios on someone who might have pre-existing health conditions, or someone who's working in the medical field, or someone who doesn't have access to internet. Just feel free to email us, and I'll even throw our phone number to the office in the comment box later as well, just so that we can make sure everybody has the answers.
You know what? And I'm going to be plugging this one more than once today for help. But the 311 system that we have, if you are having difficulty navigating the website, or you feel like you've made it to the wrong page, or you're, just could use some extra direction, our 311 system here in Orange County is an investment that we made to help all of our residents navigate these things. And they've been trained to help residents navigate that registration system for testing and for vaccinations.
Yeah. So I know we always do like a COVID reminder, and then we also try to let people know that I think last week there was an update that their Vision 2050 survey has been extended to March, and maybe you can just do a little summary on Vision 2050 and what that means.
Yes, and for those of you that have been following these, I know you've heard me talk about it before. Just bear with us and actually just help us spread the word. Vision 2050 is our opportunity to give our input for the next comprehensive plan for Orange County. Our comprehensive plan is how we um, really designate different pieces of property for their use. And anybody who has lived in an area and you thought, well, I wonder why that's on that corner, or what could they have thought not putting something right here? Those questions usually go back to the original comprehensive plan. So this opportunity to give our input for the next comprehensive plan is really important. It's really critical. And it doesn't matter how much expertise you have in comprehensive planning. Some of this is really just about your knowledge of our community. So and when you go to the Vision 2050 webpage, and I encourage you to do it, there are presentations that the planning department has already done for some of the areas of Orange County. You can watch one of those and get an idea of how they're actually designating some of these areas, how they've designated them, some of them in the past, and then you can give your input at certain times during that process. I think at this point that if we have an opportunity to share our concerns and even our observations about what hasn't worked in planning, we have to pipe up now. We don't get to complain, not even for another minute, if we don't get our 2 cents in when they ask us to share our 2 cents.
Mhm. Yes, so for more information on that, we'll drop, you can just Google Orange County, Florida Vision 2050, or we can drop the link in the chat.
Exactly.
I also would recommend, just reaching out to our office if you need help. Let's say you don't have access to internet or something and you want to have some help filling out these surveys or making your voice heard. We have many ways to send that out. Um, Another little update from my end is that I officially started a newsletter on your behalf. And we're super excited because a lot of people want to be informed. And right now we're not doing a lot of in-person events, but this website and newsletter, NicoleWilson.org, you can fill out the form on the front page to be a part of the newsletter, and hopefully we'll be able to stay on top of that. It is a work in progress. A lot more information will be added the more that you, the commissioner, will be kind of involved in the community and we can get feedback from constituents, but please sign up to the newsletter as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lee. I can't tell you how excited I am. It's another layer of communication, which I think is sort of the cornerstone of our office, and our mission is to try to connect and to keep connecting in as many ways as we can. I know that these office hours were, such another great idea for us to put in our schedule, that Lee's like, keep us on the schedule. That way we can it's always ongoing, information coming out, information coming in. The newsletter is going to develop that way also. So if there's something that you want us to address in the newsletter, or if you want to send other people to make sure they register for it, it will be continuing to grow as we grow, and we'll learn from each other. I'm super excited about it.
Well, one big thing that people actually have been emailing us about is redistricting.
It's coming.
And I didn't know anything about what that even really meant, but it was kind of something that was popping up on social media a lot. Can you explain the redistricting process, since you had a chance to have a briefing this week?
Absolutely. So and actually this goes for all elections that are based on geographical locations, but in the county, we have been split into districts. Of course, we're District 1. And when a census is updated and we get another count of how many people live in all those districts, we have an obligation to make sure that we have been equitable in our distribution of the population to leadership ratio, for resources, and for representation. So the census this year, of course, kind of threw everything off a little bit because we are in a pandemic, and the typical census requires a door-to-door head count of all people living in that district. It doesn't necessarily mean people who have mailing addresses or people who have social security numbers. It is literally a head count. So with being sort of pushed back with the pandemic, what will happen is the process of us figuring out how that redistricting will happen in Orange County is going to look a little different. And so we had a briefing this week about making sure that we were keeping up with our own charter requirements, which include a board that helps us really determine what the most fair and equitable way of redistricting is. Including getting in all the accurate and updated census information. So, it seems like, right from like the common sense perspective, well, why don't we just hold off on this until we know for sure what that census information is? Well, we can't hold off too long because it may get into the next election cycle. So even though for District 1, there won't be another election for 4 years, the even districts will be in 2 because they're every 2 years. So, in an attempt to make sure that there's no interruption or no disruption to our election systems and our democracy, we have to get that count in, and we have to figure out how to make sure that if there's a distribution or redistribution, how we're doing it fair and equitably. So it's a process, and it's going to require input from citizens. There's a lot of anxiety in communities that it may end up dividing a community. And I will tell you that, with every shred of my drive, I will work really hard to make sure that these things make sense and that we are being very sensitive to community boundaries and I know that those things, that there's a lot of historical and sociological importance. So those are all coming in. It's not just a numbers game, and it's not just a formula.
Yeah, and it sounds like the community will have a lot of opportunities to make their voice heard as well. I think they mentioned a lot of like a series of community meetings with these
Right.
boards as well.
That's right. So a series of community meetings, and my understanding about it is that it allows the advisory board, and there will be an advisory board, which is also a nice addition to the decision making process, because you get input from a wide variety of citizens that are interested enough to volunteer their time for that type of board, and they represent districts. And so they sometimes have good understanding of those geographical and social, cultural boundaries and neighborhood considerations. So there's a series of community meetings that'll be happening, and there's also a board where we haven't even appointed yet, but that'll be down the line.
Well, just to segue into updates from this past week. So when you're a new commissioner, I didn't realize that you get hit with introductory meeting and a tour and a briefing and all these things on top of kind of just starting the job and having to do your day to day, right? And so this past week, you've been packed with meetings regarding your actual job, and then tours and introductory meetings and briefings for multiple departments. So how do you feel about that?
Listen, I wish there were more minutes in an hour, and I wish there were more hours in a day, and I wish there were more days in a week. But other than that, it's been awesome, because inevitably we're having meetings about issues that are arising in the community, sometimes in the same week as a meeting or a orientation at a department. So that's ideal, because then I get to go to that department and say, hey, while we're here, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Which has happened. And I think we are learning more and more about how to resolve some of the issues, big and small. And some of the ones that we haven't been able to resolve, I think it gives us then some, longer term goals to work on. But boy, everyone in all these departments, they've been so good to us. We have felt really honored and touched by the amount of time and level of detail that they've offered. We got to, gosh, Lee, where do we start?
So I think we should start in order, because there was a little sense of competition about whose favorite was who. So if we pick one
Oh,
to talk about
okay, yeah, no, let's just
other,
we'll go with the way it came up on the
we'll
calendar.
go in order. So first off, you met with our fire department and our emergency management services department, which was like mind
Oh
blowing.
my gosh, you should sleep better at night as an Orange County resident, knowing what they're doing in Orange County Fire and Rescue. These are true heroes of our community. They've dedicated their lives to running in where everybody else is running out.
Yeah.
And boy, I am so grateful to them. The fire and rescue headquarters where we got to go and tour is also the home for our emergency services or oh my gosh, I'm totally going to mess this.
Emergency management services.
Thank you. Emergency management services. So um, often when you see right before a hurricane where there are evacuation instructions or sandbag pickup location instructions being given at a press conference, it's also right there. It's also where the 911 calls from Orange County come in, and they have their operations center there is a sight to behold. When I tell you that they are the eyes and ears and heartbeat. I was so impressed with their operations. It was really great to hear about all of the engagement they've already had in District 1, the projects that they are foreseeing in District 1, and across the county. It was really wonderful to hear about what the algorithm is when someone makes a 911 call and how those calls are handled in the matter of time that they turn them around in is remarkable. I think there's the level of healthcare that is provided in an emergency call just absolutely blew my mind. So I think people often wonder where their tax dollars go, and it is amazing to me how much a department like that does with as little as they get. So I'm always going to be an advocate for my firefighter friends and my health and emergency management friends. They work so hard, and there is not they don't clock out of that. I mean, I know they take turns, but when you're sleeping, there is somebody watching over you. So it is it's a comfort to all of us.
I was very impressed, and I think I'll probably say this after every single thing that we talk about, but we are so lucky to be Americans.
Oh
Like
my
that
God.
is something that really the privilege of what we have access to.
Yes.
We get so kind of distracted almost by headlines and what's in the news, and we feel almost like America isn't as progressive or as far ahead as other countries. We're always like comparing ourselves and thinking that America should be better, we should take it a step further. Like, and when if you've ever traveled outside of the country and not to a first world nation,
Yeah.
the change and the difference in where our taxes go and what we have access to and how we mobilize our governmental assistance and programs, it is astounding to me how much we have when you compare us to other countries. And this was one of those things that I was like, wow, I feel really safe.
I agree. And I think even when they showed the the call pickup times and to me, these things seem superhuman. Nonetheless, something that they are working to even try to improve on. We are so fortunate, and I agree with you. I am very, very grateful. And that goes up and down the line because it takes every person that is in an organization like that for an organization like that to work. And then the leadership has to be really good. And you have to see that kind of strong leadership in order to really be able to do the things that they do. But I'm grateful to be American. I'm grateful to be an Orange County resident, all of the above. And I'm grateful to them for opening the doors and showing us all of what they have and what they do so that we can share it. I wished on every one of these that everyone could do this. And I think, maybe at some point when we get kind of a rhythm that we could do some kind of Facebook Live virtual field trips or something, because it is truly such an advantage for everyone that lives in Orange County to know about everything that is here and what we do.
Yeah. And then I guess moving on to, well, actually, I'm sorry. I just want to bring up the 911 calls that you had brought up.
Yeah.
So, wow, it is like a movie. It's almost like Law and Order, like the setup that you see on TV. You go into a dark room,
It's
right?
monumental. These screens everywhere, every corner, every call, it's amazing.
And the thing that impressed me the most was that within seconds of hearing a call, the ladies and gentlemen that are working those 911 calls and dispatching the field employees, they are writing into a database and dispatching those staff to go and help while they're on the phone with someone who's experiencing extreme trauma.
Right. And sometimes they have
And
to read between the lines and they have to interpret what's being said versus what might really be happening on the other end of the phone. It, I it is, that to me sounds like the most difficult job out there, and my hats are off to the people that do that 911 um, dispatch, because there's so much that they are dealing with from across the county all at once, whereas so much of the county is divided into sections and they don't have that luxury. It just comes, and they said that it comes in waves, that when they get it's sort of a flurry of activity, so they can potentially be dealing with an auto accident, a crime, and a mental health crisis, all within minutes of each other. And
Mhm.
I thought it was really important, and I'm glad you brought that up, for people to know that I think often when a dispatcher keeps the person who's calling on the phone, the person that's in crisis on the other end of the phone wonders why they haven't hung up to go do something. And so, to your point, they've already activated. They're keeping you on the line to try to see what else they can do until that activation and until the call is complete, until somebody gets to you. So, for instance, they said that they're all trained on CPR, and that they all have heightened training in um, identifying mental health issues. And so there's all these things that they try to keep the dialogue going if they can, while they've activated emergency services, because it's their only connection until the physical connection is made.
Yeah. And so that was my most kind of shocking thing, was that there's human beings on the other ends of these calls and they are experiencing trauma with these individuals, and they have to be trained to take anything that comes in. So if they have to help give birth with someone over the phone, they have to do it right after
And
hearing.
we're like, did that happen? They all laughed. They're like, yeah, like, of course that happens. It must happen more than we would have thought, because they thought that was a funny question.
Yeah, yeah. They're getting like hundreds of calls a day. Like I think upwards of like 300 calls a day. So that shook me to my core,
Yes,
honestly.
yes,
The next one that you went to was touring the correction facility.
yes. You were with me. It was, it, I think it for, I think there's a lot of things that as our day-to-day lives go by, they are out of sight, out of mind. And I think this is one of those that we should think about and consider more often, because it is truly like a city. We have a corrections facility in Orange County that, um, the majority of the current inmates are actually awaiting sentencing, which I thought was really remarkable and a little bit concerning, knowing that that is partly as a result of the backlog from COVID, which means that when you consider due process rights, it's a concern. People should be through that process. Um, but there is a wide range of inmates that come through. They do have. It's interesting. I hadn't been there. I was there a long time ago when I was in law school, and I hadn't been there in that period of time. And there've been some changes in the way that Orange County, the prosecutor's office, does um, approach some of the crimes that are called for. And so it was very interesting to me that there were fewer juveniles this time than the last time. And I mean by
Mhm.
a large count. So,
Yeah. 40 to 8.
yeah,
They had 40 around the time that you were there last, and then they had 8
yes.
in custody right now.
Yes, which, I think is actually a tremendous accomplishment, because the juveniles that are there in that corrections facility are there because they're being adjudicated or treated by the legal system as though they were adults. And that is it's a very serious decision to make, because as we know, in the state of Florida, once you go through that process, your life is very difficult. Even if you paid your due and done your time and you're done and you've paid back your debt to society, oftentimes it's
Mhm.
hard to get that off of off your back and to carry on. And I think that's something that we have an obligation to work on making better, because I think that, you know if you talk about corrections in a corrections facility, look at the word
Mhm.
correction, right? It's not a penalty facility. What we're trying to do is to make sure that we can bring everybody back in as productive citizens and not set them up for failure, and so that they end up in a cycle of reoffending. And so, to that point, we were able to find out that they have ongoing educational programs that were very comprehensive. And I thought that it was interesting that actually the next BCC meeting, one of the agenda budget items is for a partnership with a community college, getting some of those educational programs provided and paid for through the budget. So um, I think that's something that we need to continue to focus on, and trying to make sure that we stop the cycle for some of these people who haven't had a good way to stop the cycle, and they end up sort of in a revolving door.
Mhm. And I think one of the major things that the staff had made a request for you and I to do with the District 1 office is to kind of shed some light on the operations that happen there, because, one of the guards basically said, it's not sexy. We're not climbing trees and rescuing cats and like going into burning buildings and, wearing the best outfit, like the fire department. They made a little tease there. I think there's a stigma associated with the prison system and with the correction facilities and how guards treat inmates. And right now, especially upon a time where everyone is really learning about social justice and the system and, all of the stigma behind that, they really want to help. And I heard the word mental health brought up at least 10 times.
Mhm.
And also, COVID preparation and met their attention to the medical needs of the inmates. Like, these are things that you don't see on cops, that you don't see on TV.
It's such a good point. And I also want to say that I think there's been some negative discussion about getting those vaccines to the inmates. It's critical because those inmates are also with medical providers. They have a whole medical staff there. They are also with corrections officers and educators and volunteers, and those people are part of our community. And the thing that they have that's not the same as our community is they can't isolate. They don't
Mhm.
have the right to isolate. So to me, it's a no-brainer to go ahead and get that population vaccinated, knowing that will then decrease the percentage of exposure for all of the contacts that they have, because you can't just consider that some silo. And so, yeah, I think it's they were really cute too, talking about yeah, people just drive right by here on John Young, and they don't think about it. They don't think about what's going on here. And I thought it was a very, well, first of all, they were so kind to us about, answering any questions and showing us everything that we wanted to see. And I think it is another mysterious place for us as people who don't work in that world or who haven't been incarcerated. They're people. And I mean that as in, like, everybody in every cell, everybody that comes in there and walks out of there, whether they work there, whether they contract there, whether they're visiting a family member. And so, we have to remember our humanity and our connection with humanity at all stages of that, and
Mhm.
trying to make sure that we provide the most opportunities we can to be a corrections operation, not a holding operation. And
Mhm.
and when I say that, I mean in getting people whatever they need to then re-enter and stay in productive society. And so they have options besides reoffending. In the mental health portion, it is, we've talked about this now, how many weeks in a row that, when you talk to the staff, the clinical staff and the staff at the corrections facility, and they talk about the large percentage of people they have with severe mental health illness, and you realize that it is a component in how they got incarcerated, then you know that it's going to be a much better investment for our society to really do mental health treatment the right way than to continue to throw money at this, at the end point incarceration. So, and I know that the people in the corrections department agree that they want as many resources as they can to provide treatment and mental health alternatives for individuals, citizens, residents that they encounter, because they realize that it's not the ideal situation of a place to get mental health treatment.
Yeah, and I do want to bring up though something they said that the general public doesn't realize is that they did change so much of their operation for COVID, the way that they take in, and they do have some form of isolation for those first 14 to 20 days when an inmate is first brought in, and how they've completely changed and recategorized each of the cells, and when they let people go from point A to point B. I think there's just a stigma that everyone is just kind of in one big cell, and that the contamination rates are super high. And the problem, it was in the news a lot, and our team in the county, they're working very, very hard to make sure that people are safe and that their mental and physical health are prioritized. I noticed that.
Yes, I agree. It was, well, for starters, it was spotless, and I know that sounds kind of like, well, duh, they knew the commissioner was coming, but I don't know that. And we walked by places that were, areas of, of the processing, right? We walked by intake, we walked through where they do first bookings and where they have their initial hearings. And so the procedures they have really were explained to us in a way that gave us an understanding of what was put in for safety and security of both the employees and the staff, and also anybody from the public that ends up being incarcerated or being detained for even if it's a short time. And so it was interesting. There's the part of that initial processing that looks a little bit like an airport lobby. I don't know if you got the sort of different kind of corners of it, but there was sort of a one side had some clinical centers where if there was anything going on physically that wasn't, severe enough to be sent out, that they could be seen. And then on the other side, they had a place to actually inquire about diversion programs. And I think it's another thing that's important for people to know about, that there are a number of diversion programs out there that if somebody is dealing with recovery from a drug or alcohol addiction, sometimes there's opportunities for professional diversion programs or veterans diversion programs. So they have a designated area actually for those people right when they first get processed. So yeah, it was fascinating. I think it's another place that I wish more people could see and understand sort of the process, because it's mysterious and scary for a lot of people, and and I understand that too.
Yeah, I just think about like a rubric that we should have to officially become an adult. Like when you
Right.
turn 18, you should tour all these facilities so that you can like say where
Yes.
XYZ takes place.
Yeah.
And then now you're an adult, because I'm 30 years old and I just now am seeing all these things behind the scenes and I feel like a child.
Well, no, it's just, I mean, I think it makes you realize how complex our society is.
So
That part
much.
of living in the time and the day and age that we live in, and we have a lot of work to do, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the things that we sort of are in the background or kind of background noise for us are actually really complex. So
We're very privileged. We're very, very privileged. I would have to say that. I kept feeling like the things that I don't know are being taken care of. and I don't have to worry about it. And that's a huge privilege. So yeah, the next tour that you took, and I was there too, but I keep saying you because I want to hear about your feelings of this experience. You went to the utilities department
Oh yeah.
and the water reclamation center, which I felt was really cool.
My gosh, this was so crazy. The whole thing, okay. So, and by the way, you were there, so I want to hear your 2 cents also, because we couldn't always, chit chat freely. So this could be a, good opportunity for us to get each other's thoughts on it. First of all, you talk about things that you didn't know a lot about, that you thought you knew a lot about. There, seeing the water reclamation facility up close and personal had to be, one of my all-time favorite adult moments. Which I know is crazy, because I literally was standing over wastewater and the stuff that you flush. But to see the way that we actually process that and what goes into it, and what really, here's what I think, and this is why I think it gives me such great hope and optimism for things, is that, I think for as many problems as humans bring on themselves, they are pretty freaking amazing in their ability to come up with solutions. And so it gives me that great optimism when you hear about the way that they're processing that water, and I know we have a lot of work to do on water, and we have a lot of water issues, but it was just a really interesting process to learn about the functionality and how we do have to work with the biology that we understand. So it is still bigger than us, and that they continue to be improving and working on it, because ultimately we're going to run out of the groundwater. And so if we don't figure out how to truly recycle water, we're going to die. And I don't like thinking about it, because it gives you that existential crisis feeling, like what's going to happen to us when we run out of water. And I know there are in process right now other alternative water supply plans and programs and projects. But to see this biological process and to hear from the engineers that are right there running it every day, that come up with some of these solutions, was really such a great experience. Tell me what you thought.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, just the fact that you're willing to admit openly, because for whatever reason, water has become like a partisan political talking point, which to me is unnecessary because it's a human need.
Yeah.
So you speak so freely about it. And so I have to just say, that's a huge, brave thing.
Just seems like a no-brainer. I don't understand that, but then again, you know me, I'm like sometimes I'm like the clueless politician that's like, that is, how could that be partisan? I don't understand. We're talking about
need water.
I don't get it. So,
and I definitely felt like the Water Reclamation Center was an eye-opening experience, because it's another one of those things where everybody has their day-to-day job, and the majority of us are not in that field, and we take for granted how easy it is for us to flush and forget.
yeah.
And I definitely kept.
Don't flush your wipes.
Don't flush your wipes or your pills.
Or your pills. Do not flush your wipes or your pills.
That was the big take home. And try not to make poop jokes when you're touring for Water Reclamation Center. But no, I think, I felt like the process was really eye-opening, and I was very impressed, and just kept feeling like, wow, we are so fortunate to have this type of facility. I do think, though, however, when we actually sat down with the utilities department and we were asking these really challenging questions about the long-term goal and the long-term plan, I saw that steps are happening in that direction. But again, you're a commissioner who's making a very public stance on the fact that access to water is a human right. It hasn't always been that way. And so I kind of felt like we were a little bit more behind than where we should be.
Look, and I think we're going to be right back there, right? Because unfortunately, I think we understand in the framework of what's happened during the pandemic, what scarcity does to humans, right? Scarcity is is something we don't deal with often in our privileged society. And it is anxiety provoking. I mean, think about, we went crazy about toilet paper. Can you imagine what's going to happen if we have to start rationing water?
Mhm.
And so when we talk about the comprehensive plan and we talk about densities and we talk about does growth pay for itself? These aren't economic versus park space questions. These are really actual health and safety questions. So, you know, and I'm not an alarmist. I'm an optimist. I call myself a masochistic optimist because I continue to read things like, you know, updates from um, engineers and scientists about what they are projecting and what they think we need to be looking at. It is alarming when you look at the projected growth for this area and you look at our water supply and you look at other areas of the country and world. We have to really be not just honest about talking about it. We've got to be really proactive and aggressive about it. And I know that we've been on more fact-finding missions recently. And I think we've done, you know, you do a great job also of like wording sort of the question, like what the heck's going on in a much better way. Because I'm like, but the question remains that if we are looking at projected growth for an area and we're taking into account things like legal right of way and you know, are they part of the urban service area, which means do they already get piping? Those are all really important, but none of it matters if in 3 years we're not going to have enough water to get in a pipe to those people, or you know, the people who are on wells, if that groundwater goes away. So we just have to keep, you know, asking and talking and making sure that we connect those dots. I think we have found more and more as the days go on, and Lee, tell me if you think I'm wording this the right way, that because the departments are very busy with what projects they have and they have very delineated roles, that sometimes those things run like this when really they're going to have to run like this. So, you know, when you look at utilities and you ask about, you know, well, you know, has this been considered, this water supply issue been considered in the comprehensive planning or in any comprehensive planning updates when we look at density changes? And they're like, that's not what we do. I get it. That's not what they do. But then is that what we need to do? So yeah, that's sort of the philosophical head scratcher that we've had this week about how to make sure that long after I'm out of office, that we've done everything that we could, that I could, to make sure that that um, we're sustaining life, all life, and those waterways.
Yeah. And just the last point on that, you know, it's easy for someone with term limits to look at just that term and how the things that you're voting on or thinking about are just related to your time in office. But you, as a commissioner, you're not doing that. You're like, I'm here for this finite amount of time, but everything I do is going to be long lasting beyond my time in office, you know,
Honestly,
and
scares
more
me.
people.
I get actually more anxiety about it because I'm like, I only have so much time. I only have so much time, and I have that fear that you know that if I do it right, and I you know, make sure that I keep you know, answering to everybody out there and having you know, keeping focused and getting it done, that the most I get is 8 years. And when you talk about some of these long-term planning issues and trying to make sure that we've figured out how multi-generations will make it, yeah, it's got to go way past us, but we are part of a larger community that really has to come up with some solutions, because it's not just Orange County and it's not just the state of Florida. You know, so it's an obligation, I think, as a human.
Well, thank you for all your hard work. And then last but not least by far, we toured the public works and traffic engineering team's world. And wow, we learned a lot.
Oh my gosh, they are so busy. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Okay, so you know, amongst other things, I love that they made me spreadsheets for my eyes, because
Thank
they're not
you
the
for your
little ones.
spreadsheet.
Yes, they're not the little ones or the big ones, but they're basically like projects that are going to be happening in District 1 that will, possibly impact people and that they want to make sure that we know about. So, if there is something that you're curious about, that you had heard that something was going on, reach out. We now have some information that we've got right at our fingertips. We were able to really, we had a really great briefing from all the different divisions and have a much better understanding of some of the ways they interact. I think it's going to make us a lot more able to connect the right people with residents that are having issues or that need help with things that are out there that are part of our public works world. So that's our roadways, that's our stormwater, that's our signs. If you see a missing stop sign, I know where they're making them. Those guys are really cool. They make cool signs. So yes, we now feel a lot more comfortable with the ins and outs of public works. And boy, that it could be a whole nother one of these because it was so detailed and informative. And as you all know, and I think especially in District 1 where there's a lot of growth, what goes into traffic engineering and just an intersection is a lot. But I think that I still need to talk, hear from you all about some of the places that we can continue to improve on and try to get in that pipeline, because I know that sometimes there's that lag of time, that there was an expectation that it was going to happen now. It didn't happen. What's going on? So, we are in a better position now to try to figure out where things are in that process and try to get answers.
Yeah, and I definitely, because I'm in the middle of both, so I have like the county staff over here, and then I have the constituents over here, and then I have Commissioner Wilson up here, So like I have all these different voices, right, that I hear, and I have to echo, I have to be the communicator. So when I talk to constituents, I know by the time it reaches our office, people are usually mad. And that's okay, because they probably have been dealing with issues for a really long time, whether that's they see a traffic light, that they just see an accident there all the time, or they see, they've been asking for something like a speed bump or a traffic light in their community, but then across the street they see something else and they just get frustrated. This is another one of those things where if everybody had a chance to do the tour that we had the ability to do, I think empathy on that side, would be really, really huge, because I know that the staff, it sounds like they really care and they really want to help, but they're also dealing with development plans that are from like the 50s, trying to put in new communities next to older communities where some rules apply one place and the other. And they just, and then they have people that have lived there forever and people that have lived there, for just a few months. And one major thing that I think would be a perfect way to explain it is the speed bump thing, where some people are mad that traffic is happening in their community. So they want a speed bump, they rally the community together, they get a petition signed, they want that speed bump. And then there's a whole rigorous process to get that speed bump in. But then once that speed bump's in, the traffic starts to move into another community and another street. And now that community is upset. And so even though these people now aren't thinking about it anymore because things are slower in their community, now we have a whole new batch of voices that are riled up over the traffic moving like water through their community.
Yeah. And I got a sense of frustration on some level also with the budgeting process. And I do understand that we have a certain amount that we take in as revenue and that is budgeted for projects, and they some of them are prioritized based on different things. And so they're very constrained. And I know that they don't want to be in a position where they're considered the stumbling block to what would be a great area. So I know they really, really want to do what they can to make sure that the process goes as smoothly as it can go. I think, the part that I keep rounding back on as far as how in some areas of District 1, and I know this is across the county true, where the housing itself outpaces the infrastructure or the growth of the building and construction of the roads and the intersections. And I think it's a fair thing for consumers, and I mean people who are purchasing a home, to ask the questions of the private entity that's selling the home. And I'm not deterring you from buying a home. I think you should. It's a great, if you can do it, do it. But I think as a consumer, you can ask, what is a realistic timeline, and can you show that to me? Because I think that the problem is that oftentimes and especially in a newer area, when people go out, they get very excited about what's coming, and they're told by somebody who's making a living by selling that home, this is going to be fabulous. There's going to be this here and the road there, and there's going to be this trail here. But they didn't tell you is that's going to be that's a 15-year project. So, and the frustration is understandable, because that sounds like you didn't get the whole picture because they didn't describe it all. So I do think, there is a consumer element there. I don't like the idea that things may be misrepresented to people. And if I can catch on to that, we will try to narrow in on where that happens. Because there has been some dialogue from residents that say, well, they told us when we purchased the house that, XYZ. And it breaks my heart, because that means that somebody along the way either didn't do their due diligence or didn't express what they were supposed to have expressed in a candid disclosure. And I think it's something that, unfortunately ends up being a default issue that we have to resolve as the local government. And I'm up for that. We will, we'll continue to pursue all avenues to make sure that the quality of life that people have here is the best it can possibly be. But, I would definitely put my guard up in those circumstances. And you go into a beautiful model home, and, they've got the model of the way it's going to all look when it's done, and find out what the timeline is, get the whole picture, because those come with agreements for, when the schools are going to be built, and when those actual lights might be going in, may actually already be in the works or in the pipeline, but not as far along as you would want them to be. So I think it's something that we all have a little bit of a role to play in trying to make sure that nobody feels blindsided. But it's frustrating for people that are in existing communities, I think, that are being a lot of times impacted by growth. It's not their growth, and it's on the outside of that. That is where I think that comprehensive planning and trying to get the input from citizens on what's going to be coming next is really important. And that Vision 2050, I think that getting a real urban boundary and a real urban service area is critical, because if we don't do that, then we continue to make really every village, if you will, a commuter village, which then it isn't really a village. So, I think looking at making sure that people can live, work, and play near where they are is really important for quality of life. And so some of the areas that are, I think, very heavily impacted, that we're told at some point in the history of Orange County that this would always look like this. This is always going to stay rural. That they've been impacted by decisions that were made outside of those boundaries, that they end up being a cut through community. And so, that's frustrating. I will going to continue to look for solutions everywhere we can. And I know a lot of it's going to take time and some creativity, but I think we're up for it.
Yeah, and I have to say, I have to admit, I was one of those people that just would get mad if my emails to the county, to whatever department, weren't answered in a timely manner. I would just be like, my tax dollars are paying their salaries, so I have the right to be heard immediately on my issue, which in my head was in the top of the priority list. Why isn't it for them? And now that I've had this humbling experience of touring these facilities and seeing what they go through, and me personally now sending them close to like 200 emails a week minimum, like maybe even feels like a day, but I don't think anybody is trying to really purposefully go slow because you're bothering them or what have you. Like I think ultimately everyone wants to help, but there's guidelines and rules and restrictions that are a very slow thing that you have to change over time with votes and with consideration from the public and seeing all these steps in the system makes me feel confident in the system, because we don't want things to just change all willy-nilly and crazy, because then it would just be a chaotic mess. We want to have that protocol, right?
Exactly. Because for all the complaints I have about comprehensive planning, can you imagine what it would be like if we didn't?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, can you imagine? It just would be, to your point, those structures keep, it is part of our kind of social contract. And, it's interesting because I think, we've had a couple of instances where residents sort of felt singled out. And I understand that. I think we've all been there where you feel like because something happened that didn't seem to be happening to your neighbors or to somebody that was on the other side of the county, that you felt singled out. And a lot of times when we talk to the residents, they'll realize, oh, then that is part of the procedure of trying to keep something out of a storm drain, because that can affect the downriver that ends up going to the Everglades, or this could affect the way that we process our recyclables. And so when you look at kind of that bigger picture of it, I think it makes people realize that they're not being singled out, or definitely does me when I look at some of these issues and you realize that those procedures, even if they don't always make the most sense for that singular circumstance, will oftentimes make sense for the greater good. And if they don't, then we do need to retool them. And that's where we're really trying to kind of separate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, there are things that are outdated that need to be changed, and things that people aren't talking about or like bringing up, but they are problems too that, as a commissioner, you're kind of the bird's eye view of not just your district, but the whole county. And so I find it really fascinating that your community so vocal. So you do have some insight, but you're also like thinking strategically for the whole county long term.
I love it. I feel so grateful to District 1 because they really do a great job of keeping us in the know. And I sound like a broken record on this one, but it's important because we cannot be everywhere. And in fact, we're right now really buried under a lot of other stuff. So really getting that information from people it's everything. And I think people are so sweet because they're like, I'm so sorry. I know you're so busy. I know this is going to be, really weird thing. And I'm like, no, it's really important that you let me know, because that's my job, even if I am busy, and I'm not going to know sometimes unless there's the contact from a resident. I think about one of the other things we've found out, and I think this is just true for what we want of government, right, is to make sure that we're not really top heavy, right? You don't want government to be overspending on things that aren't necessarily needed. So there are really, some of these departments are spread very thin, and they're really doing a lot on a little bit of budget, which means that there isn't a ton of time to be in the field on everything that you kind of wonder if they see or know. If you're wondering, then probably not. And you should just go ahead and let somebody know. And, if it is something that has already made the radar of somebody in the county, then yeah, no harm, no foul. But there can be things that really are important to the, function of public works, or of great concern to a lot of residents, and you could be the one to kind of raise the flag. And so don't ever feel hesitant on that, and don't ever feel that you're pestering us, because we're here. It's important. We want to hear from you.
Well, a comment that was left was from Laura Betts, who said that Orange County had a program called the Orange County Experience 4 years ago, which was a leadership program that provided tours of all these facilities. And she was wondering if we would ever do like a virtual version of that.
Oh my gosh, I think that's a great idea. I
Yeah.
think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So we'll be in touch about that, because we said that every tour we were like, we need to do this with the community,
Really, the departments, I think, all also felt like it would help improve what their goals were and what their missions are. to get that information out. So I think it's a win-win. We will definitely we'll definitely push for that. I didn't realize that structure was in place. I think that if there's I wonder if that was through their communications department. We'll dig
We'll
on
find
that.
out.
Yeah, we'll
We'll find out for sure. So thank you all so much. There's no other questions, but feel free to email district1@ocfl.net if you have any questions or comments. We'll be back next Friday at 4. Commissioner, do you have any closing remarks?
I just want to thank everybody again. I just, it was another really busy but great week. I am a little behind on my emails because, as you heard, we were out, but I will catch up, and I want you to know that we are super, super grateful. I am so grateful to you all, and have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe and stay in touch.
Yay. Dawn from Noah's Notes just wrote us and said, FYI, as a public service, we are preparing a guide to wildlife in Orange County. If constituents are interested, we are asking people to email us sightings at savewildlife@noahsnotes.org. It's in the comments,
Thank you, Dawn.
with a photo if possible. So it'll help them monitor what they see, and then they're going to keep an archive. So thank you, Dawn.
Ron, you know what? That's another one of those things. There is no inventory like that. It breaks my heart. I thank you so, so, so much for all the work that you do. It's amazing.
And thank you, Commissioner, for spending this time and for making yourself accessible and transparent to the public. It's really a huge role model. Like, you're a huge role model to me. So thank you.
What? I couldn't do it without you. And this week, more than one time, we had a situation where I think, there was a resident, more than one, who felt very unheard and expressed to me their gratitude for you and your kindness and compassion and your brilliance. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
And thank you all for watching too. Please visit NicoleWilson.org and write to district1@ocfl.net. We greatly appreciate you, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.